A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As-salatu was-salam ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilman. So, assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to our session today. Today, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently than we normally do, and I thought it might be a really good way to, many of us spend more time than we normally do, whatever that time is, in the month of Ramadan, reciting the Quran. And today, let's just see how we can kind of enhance and develop a personal relationship with the Quran. So that's kind of the goal. And how we're going to be doing this is, so we will start with some guided and personal reflections, some group reflections. We will find a format from within the Quran to assess our current relationship. What is it? Are we using it in the way that it is meant to be used? And then, use that kind of to guide ourselves. We will learn from each other. And, so I'm going to be sharing a lot of questions, like basically they're guided reflections. And the purpose is to have a format, so whenever we read a verse of the Quran and I want to start applying it in my life, how do I do that? So just some questions to guide our learning in that sense, and, come up with our own plan to develop a personal relationship with the Quran. So that's kind of, the broad where we're going. And also just to know that today is very light on theory. I mean, I have some, obviously, guidance from the Quran itself, but, we're not going to go into too much what the scholars have said, too many ahadith, because again, the goal for today is to, to empower each one of us to connect to the Quran. Okay, so that's the kind of framework. So if we were to, and this is, please, it's going to be very much interactive. So, let's all jump on the chat. And the first question for us is, what is the Quran and what is its purpose? So obviously, all of us know this at some level, but if a non-Muslim was to ask you this question, right? If, hopefully we have conversations with non-Muslims, with people who are not inside our faith, because really these are really good ways to clarify what we think. Sometimes we get defensive, or we get, nervous, right? And really, if we approach these questions with a view that this will really help me clarify, because whenever you're explaining anything to someone, or it could be a child, right? Obviously, children today ask many questions, which is a blessing many times. So how would you explain it either to a non-Muslim or to a child? So please share this in chat. How do you understand what is the Quran and what is its purpose? And, all of these questions, go with your gut, and few, we don't have to give long thesis, first thought, first out kind of thing.
All right, ladies, you can either type up your answers on the chat, and if those of you who are comfortable to unmute yourselves and answer, please go ahead. I see a hand raised. Aranti, go ahead.
Quran is the guidance. See, whenever we buy anything from the outside, we look at the manufacturer, what the instructions are. Allah has made us, and that is the instructions of the life, how to live the life in the Quran. That's what it is.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Really good response. And just for the sake of time, we will have time absolutely to share with each other. But, just for now, let's keep it in the chat just to, this is only the first question, right? So keep it moving by sharing in the chat.
There are a few answers on the chat. Would you like to read them yourself? Or
yeah, sure. So it's a word of Allah for human guidance. It was sent to Allah for the guidance of all humanity. Okay, great. And, what if a child or a non-Muslim asked you, obviously the Quran is not in the language that we use every day. So many of us, we may be speaking Gujarati, Urdu, English, Kutchi, whatever we speak, the Quran is not in those languages. And most of our recitation is done in Arabic, in the original language, which is really important, don't get me wrong. But if somebody was to ask you, so why do you read something that you don't understand? Obviously, if the purpose is guidance, in order to, get guidance from something, I would imagine that we need to understand it, right? So how does that help you? So how would you explain that to a non-Muslim? So again, let's just, for the sake of time, let's just keep it in the chat for now, and we will have a chance to share on the mic as well.
Assalamu alaikum. Can we share now or afterwards?
No, please. As I ask the questions, please go ahead.
Okay, salam everyone. I was listening to Maulana Bakri of Toronto, and he was saying that we must read Quran in the language we understand. Like, we have been told all the time to read in Arabic, but we must learn read the translation. And he said there are so many people, thousands and millions converting to Islam. They don't convert because they've just read the Quran in Arabic, because if they had read in Arabic, they wouldn't understand a word. But they read the translation. That's why the non-Muslims are converting. So we are left behind. I think we have been misled by our Maulanas for so many years.
Okay.
And,
sorry. So we're not going to go there, right? The purpose really. So, one of the things that we really need to recognize, right? Again, what does the Quran tell us? That we need to take responsibility for our actions, right? So, putting the onus on another person is not helpful. It's just not going to move us further. Okay. So, the translation in this day and age is absolutely available to everyone, right? There is, what is stopping us is the question, that is what's going to move forward. Because remember, the more we relate to our own sphere of influence, our own sphere of action, we can actually do something about it. When we start talking about this one should have done something, or that one should do it, it's the community's responsibility, it's Zainabiya's responsibility, it's the madrasa's responsibility, all of those are kind of most disempowering statements, right? They're really, I'm not even talking about right or wrong. I'm just going to say that they're completely disempowering because we don't have control over anyone else, right? So for the purposes of this discussion, let's just make it a ground rule that we will only talk about ourselves, right? So why do you read something that you do not understand? How does that help you? And how would you explain it to a non-Muslim? Because if we told a non-Muslim that, we have been misguided, right? Is that going to be very inspiring, to them? Okay. So let's read what some of the chat says, or make.
I would like to say something.
Okay.
Can I say, or you read the chat?
It's better for the chat because we have a very packed agenda.
Yeah. Okay.
And just for the sake of time, just to keep things moving, but absolutely, these are really important conversations, and absolutely. So if you could write it in the chat, that would be great.
Don't like writing.
So we have to learn Arabic to understand. Absolutely. It's our responsibility. Learning Arabic should be wajib for all, young and old. Again, fair enough. Do you know Arabic is the question, and do you understand everything that is written, even if you do, even if you speak Arabic, right? So, let's move on. When we're talking about the relationship with the Quran, the first question comes is, what does it mean to have a relationship, right? And if you look up the definition of relationship, it means it is the state of being connected. Okay. And when you look at your relationship, or when I look at my relationship with the Quran, am I connected? What does that mean? You know, how often do I refer to it? Do I think about it? Do I have any of it in my being? Like, do I know it enough that when I am taking an action, I know what, what the Quran says about it, right? Many of us, we spend a lot of time on fiqh, on Sharia, on hadith. None of that, I'm not saying any of that is wrong, right? Do I know what the Quran initially says? The reason why I bring this up is because very often we come across things, like I'll give you one example. There's this WhatsApp going on, and it keeps coming back every few years, verses of the Quran to heal every ailment. Fair enough, great. I was like, wow, somebody has done the work. And when you look at the verse, they're not from the Quran, right? They're not even part of the Quran. These are du'as, which are not that they're not important. Again, we need to know what's in the Quran and what is not in the Quran. Very often we do not have that very clear. I'm talking about myself. We'll say things like, let's read a dua, or let's read, we don't know what the Quran says about something, right? So developing a relationship means at least being able to refer to it, right? Being able to know what is part of the Quran and what is part of interpretation, what is part of hadith. Like even if we follow the hadith completely, we still need to know, right, what is what is in the text. And the reason why I'm saying it is because in any kind of university, right? When you go to a university, you do an academic program. When you're learning something, the basis of that is the text. That's where you start. After you read the text is when you kind of interpret it, when you critique it, you understand it, you develop you read around it, but you start with the text. Okay. And again, Zainabi, I think, is doing a wonderful, thing by starting each session with going back to the text. This is what the text says. I'll give you one example. I was speaking to a group of youth in North America, not from our community, but within North America. There were a lot of them showed up, alhamdulillah. I think there were like 50 people in the room. And there was this one group who was quite critical. They said, we don't agree with this and we don't agree with that. And again, when you are dealing with young people, it is important to acknowledge what their concerns are. So I said, what are you referring to? Which verse? How do you understand it? And, it turned out that they hadn't actually read the verses. And I said, absolutely, we can have this conversation. We really need to, to acknowledge your concern and see what the thing is, but I really can't do that. I said, if you were in university, would you, be debating a point with your professor without having reference to the text? That's not how it works. So, what, go ahead, read it, and then we'll talk. And this is, by the way, a good way to further our conversations at home, because very often people have questions and disagreements, and we kind of shy away from it. But, the more we interact, right, we kind of, even if we're debating, if we're listening to other points of view, all of this is deepening our own understanding. So instead of shying away from it, we need to kind of develop a protocol by which we say, okay, let's get to the verse, let's look at the verse, what it says, and then let's look at the interpretations to deepen our knowledge. Okay, but again, go back to the basic, to the text in the first instinct. So, the idea is that what is my relationship with the Quran at present? How connected am I right now? And what do I want for the future? So wherever we are, even if we think that we have been studying it for a long time, that, there are many verses I have committed to memory, Am I okay with it? Do I want to kind of go a little bit further? And the month of Ramadan, alhamdulillah, is a really good opportunity for us to do that from wherever we're starting, whether we are basic, 101, never read the translation, or have been reading the translation for many years, and, I want to go further. So let's get help from the Quran itself in developing our relationship. So what is the self-described purpose of the Quran? How does the Quran describe its purpose? So this is a beautiful verse from Sura Yunus, which is chapter 10, verse 57. And many of us obviously have come across this. We know this. Let's go, step by step. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Who is it addressing, first of all? Right. And again, when we're reading the Quran, it's, to have an interactive kind of reflection, to have a live relationship with the Quran. Let's, go word by word and first see who is it addressing. So in this case, it is addressing Ya ayyuhan nas, O people. So it is addressing all of mankind. And what is it saying? قَدْ جَاءَتْكُمْ مَوْعِظَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. So what has arrived? Something has arrived, which is a mau'izah. We will go word by word. Mir Rabbikum. So where has it come from? It has come from the entity who created you, nourishes you, cherishes you, brings you to perfection step by step. Okay. Washifatun lima fi sudur. So what else is it? First of all, it is a mau'izah. It is an advice, an admonition. And it is also a healing. It is a healing ma fi sudur, for what is inside your chest, for what is in your breast, in other words, our heart. Wahudan, and it is a guidance, and we'll talk about what the difference between advice and guidance is. Warahmatul lil mu'minin. And so all of the, the fact that it is an advice, it is a shifa, it is a guidance is for all of mankind. Okay, what does that mean? That you don't need to have faith. Even if you look at the words of the Quran, they guide you to right action. The wisdom of the Quran will guide you even if you are not a believer. This is something that this verse appears to be saying, okay? And it will heal you. Why will it heal you? Because it will tell you what pollutes your soul, what pollutes your heart. Wahudan, and it is a guidance. So if you follow it, you will not go wrong. You will not go wrong. Again, many times we just, keep it to the extent that, Jannah and Jahannam, which is obviously, a important part of it. And, when we look at what Jannah and Jahannam in essence, it is the impact of our actions, of taking direction, whether we are going towards things that harm us or things that help us, okay? And it is a mercy for the believers. Yani, that is an extra kind of benefit. Why? Because obviously, if you have faith in something, if you are completely in line with your creational purpose, then it will be a source of mercy for you on many levels. Okay, so let's look at this and see how we are doing, whether we are using these four purposes. So again, just to read the verse in English again, O mankind, there has indeed come to you an advice from your Lord and a cure for that which lies within breasts, and a guidance and a mercy for believers. So advice, mau'izah, it is a reminder to do good that is done gently with care and concern. So why is there care and concern? Care and concern because we need to remember, and again, all of these things I'm saying, these are really helpful ways of explaining to children, to each other, to remind ourselves that why, and we'll come to, many times the question is that if Allah is all merciful, why is there so much mention of punishment and hell, for example, okay? So it is a reminder to stay away from evil. Evil, again, what is evil? Evil is something, so we are created. Allah has created a system, right? And in that system, when you do some things, you are in line with that purpose, with that system, and that is how we define goodness. Okay. And evil is something which is against that creational purpose, right? So if, for example, if we are good to each other, it is in line with the purpose that, or with the creational intention that Allah has for all of humanity, because his mercy, remember, is for everyone. And when we are not kind to our fellow human beings, that is not in line with the purpose for which we were created. And therefore it is defined as evil. Okay. A moiza is also that which affects the heart of the listener or has the potential to affect receptive hearts, right? So it is a reminder, but you need to be receptive to it. Why? Because if you have, you know, what the Quran says itself, if you have locks on your heart, if it is, you know, if you have decided and made an intention to kind of cut yourself from it, obviously that you will not be part of the humanity, the mankind that Allah is referring to. It is a shifa, a cure for what is in the chest. So again, you know, Mumtaz, by really beautifully, I really, you know, it was so needed what you said today. That, you know, so many ailments that are, you know, that upset us, that cause dis-ease, distress in our hearts. How does the Quran, how is it a shifa? Right. And again, Imam Ali alayhi salam says that it cares, that it contains a cure for the biggest diseases, you know, namely unbelief, hypocrisy, revolt, misguidance, and, you know, for all the things that cause us distress with people, with our situation. How? Because it changes our perspective, right? And it changes our paradigms. When we're going through kabad, when we are going through distress, it gives us the big picture view, you know, and it reminds us that whatever we are suffering is not in vain. You know, what psychologists will tell us is that the biggest thing that helps you get through grief, distress, hardship is finding meaning and purpose in it. So the Quran is continuously giving us that meaning and purpose of, you know, that no kind of suffering for people is in vain, because either it will make you better at dealing with it, or it will, you know, add to your resilience, and it will, you know, it will, you know, help you in the long term. You know, this is such a beautiful hadith, which says that if everyone from the east and west were to perish, I would not fear loneliness were the Quran with me. Why do I love this so much? You know, loneliness is an epidemic right now. And, you know, coming out of the pandemic, coming into the pandemic, this was the biggest distress of the human soul, was the loneliness that we experienced. And what this hadith is telling us is that if we have a personal relationship with the Quran, it's going to help with loneliness, which is amazing, right? So, you know, does it do that for us is the question. And hudan, is it a guidance? Is it a, you know, so again, the Quran says that it is a clear guidance on the past, on the outcomes of different actions. So Imam Ali alayhi salam says that no one will sit beside this Quran, but that when he rises, he will achieve one increase or one decrease, increase in his guidance or a decrease in his spiritual blindness. Okay. So this again talks about an interactive relationship with the Quran, right? That when we recite the Quran, he will gain something from that interaction. It is a rahmah. It is an ability. It enables us to achieve our full potential. So, you know, just on the surface, obviously it is a rahmah because it tells us what to do, what not to do. And, you know, one way of looking at it, again, when we look at the creation, right, that Allah has made creation and he has made the law of cause and effect. In other words, for example, if we're unkind to someone, the natural outcome of that is that they, it will decrease love in their heart for us, and they will not be kind back to us or to somebody else. Okay, that's kind of the natural law of relationships. Now, when Allah tells us, when there are such graphic details of hell, when there are, mentions of punishment, we need to see this in this context, right? That while we are alive, while we are in the zone of action, Allah is giving us the biggest gift of love by showing us, this path leads to this result. This path leads to this result, right? Very often as human beings, we are so short-sighted. When I look back on my life and I look at the decisions I made and some of the decisions that I regret, what I find is that if only I knew, if only I knew doing what I did, think with the best of intentions, thinking this is going to lead to good, actually didn't lead to good, right? So the rahmah of Allah is that he keeps giving us examples in the Quran. This path, this little thing that you are doing right now, it's not likely to lead to good. And that really, so again, the mention of all of these things is an act of love from Allah. So the 4 functions of the Quran can be seen as stages in the nurture and training of ourselves, right? The first, it comes from an external reminder. It's an advice, somebody telling us what to do. So whenever we hear something, obviously it's an external thing, right? The second is an internal cleansing. It is a cure for all of that. The internal stuff we can also think of as the barrier, the barrier to either listening to the advice or to following the advice, right? And the third distinguishes the path to be followed. In other words, the third aspect of it is the guidance, because when we hear advice and we kind of say, for example, somebody tells us, it's not good for you to eat this, okay? That's just an external thing. In internal, kind of dissonance or static, I like to call it, static of the ego, for example, might say, who is she to tell me, or who is he to tell me? My ego might come in the way depending on who's telling me, right? So if I kind of clean that, if I clear that, then I can listen to the advice and say, what, it actually makes sense. So let's, then I can accept the guidance, right? And the fourth is assistance on the path. One way to, again, look at it from this example is that, when I do follow the guidance, obviously the mercy is changed, right? Transformations, for example, in my health, if I listen to the guidance, if I, get away from my ego and my bad habits and actually, clear all of that, follow the guidance, then the mercy will be a result of good health, for example, right? So again, the goal of the Quran in this way is to nurture us so that, to prepare us for our ultimate purpose, right? Our ultimate purpose being to return to him in a state that we are okay, that we are worthy of being admitted to his presence and his mercy. Okay. So now the difficult questions, okay? Is the Quran relevant to my life, right? Following this format, right? Looking at the Quran itself for guidance. Advice, do the verses come to mind when I'm struggling or confused about something in my life? Do I use the verses to cure the dis-ease of my soul? Do I use it to purify my heart? Is it my companion in loneliness? Do I use the Quran for guidance? Do I consult it when I need to make a decision about something? Does it guide my actions? And I'll share, a document which has all of these questions, so you don't need to remember these. Mercy, am I in touch with his mercy when I recite the Quran? How am I in touch with his mercy? Do I actually feel it? Does my heart respond? Does my body respond? Remember, reciting and developing a relationship with the Quran needs to be an experience of my body, not just my mind. It needs to, kind of neck down, how does it impact me? Does it impact my heart? Does it impact my body? Does it impact my actions? Does it impact my soul? So now we're going to go into breakout rooms, and I would really please request that everybody, in order for this to succeed, and this is the first time I'm trying this, so let's see how it goes. We really need to keep on task, so all of us have many things to share, obviously. Just for the purposes of this, let's stick to task, because then it will help, inshallah. So spend a few minutes selecting 1 to 3 verses that call out to you and noting down your answers. So for example, and I don't, all of us, we all know some verses. We may not know the exact words, we may not know the Arabic, we may not know the English, but we know something that the verse tells us to do. All of us do, okay? So just write down 1, for example. I'll give you an example. 1, lower your voices. Now, who of us doesn't know that, right? And Allah compares it to the braying of donkeys. Now, all of us know this. We may not know the verse reference. You don't need to, okay? For this purposes, you just need to select something that is an action-oriented verse. With your group, share answers in this format, which I'm going to share with you, for 1 verse, and just take 3 minutes per person. So my verse, what it means. So for example, lower your voice, what it means. It simply means that, don't raise your voice, for example. Okay, why do I need it? I need it because I tend to get excited when I am in conflict, and I tend to raise your voice. How will I practice it? What will I do more of, less of? Right? This again is really going to help us to kind of start living the verse. Okay, so everyone shares it in the group, 3 minutes per person, and then you just get feedback from the group for 1 to 2 minutes. For example, yes, that's a great idea, or maybe try this. Okay. So what is the verse telling you? Why? What are the benefits? What is it for you today in modern life to act upon this verse? How will you live this ayat? If you were living your life according to this ayat, what would it look like? What would you be doing more of, less of? How would you be feeling? So I'm just expanding on the thing, but the questions are what we shared, okay? And then very importantly, what are some of the barriers you have or might face? So for example, in lower your voices, some of the barriers that I might face is that, my husband starts screaming first. So then when he screams, I get excited and I start screaming too. Or when my children are rude, when they, bang the door behind them, I really lose it and I find it hard to keep my thing. That's a barrier, okay? Now, again, what is the verse telling me? It's telling me to lower my voice. How will I overcome this barrier so that I can live this verse, okay? And what is your accountability process? How will you keep on track? So reality is, as soon as we try to do this, there will be challenges and there will be people who will trigger us, okay? So how will I keep on track, while I am being triggered?